everybody's well. We're online now down in YouTube land and Vimeo land, all those good things. Welcome to our live stream. We're live on YouTube, Vimeo and everywhere else on CeMAP updates, really, on the mortgage world, on the mortgage markets. There's a bit more than just CeMAP, really. We're giving you updates on all sorts of things. So just be careful what's going on out there at the moment in the world. There's signs of a little bit of a downturn at the moment. You know, Brexit coming along and world trade's beginning to sprawl a little bit as well along the way. So be careful of that. Make sure that as a business person, you're diversifying your income stream. Really important. Talking about diversification, we talk about UK house builders who in the last 3 to 4 years have been making an awful lot of money selling new houses because they've been having government subsidies in the form of help to buy. We know about this, and it's inflated their profits, it's inflated their salaries for all their big people, and everybody's quite happy about that. Whether you like it or not, that's the way things have moved on. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about help to buy. We're talking about subsidising new homes, but they've diversified their marketplace into other places, and they moved into leasehold and ground rents and selling on leases. Now, for those of you who understand about property, you understand that a flat, for example, an apartment block, needs to have leases attached to them. But what these builders have been doing in the past, they've been building houses, you know, terrace houses, detached houses, and they've been making them leasehold, which is odd, isn't it, really? But they've been selling the lease then on to investment companies to make money. The government clamped right down on that, thankfully, and they announced last week that they're pushing pressure now on the new homes companies to stop doing new build houses under leasehold. So, you know, you've got to think about these things. That's little things that have been going on in the marketplace. So what's going on then? Any questions coming down? I'm looking down there for questions. Any questions coming in from our audiences? I'm going to have a quick look to see if we've got anything coming down from YouTube. Anyone coming on stream from YouTube? There we go. Anybody on Vimeo coming in as well? Just refresh that to make sure that all is happening automatically online as we speak. So I've got a number of questions for you that I want to take care of today. I want to take care of a number of things for you. There we are. We're coming through nicely now. I've got a few pre-questions that have come down from people on Bootcamp. Again, ping me your questions. Happy to answer those as we go along. Now, the one I want to talk about first of all then is the Financial Ombudsman Service. So hi, well, let's take a look at the topic of the Financial Ombudsman Service, or FOS, as we like to call it. Now, FOS always reminds me of a 1950s based American comedy, The Foz. Do you remember that? You might show my age probably there. But it's called the Financial Ombudsman Service. So let's put that up there for you. It's metamorphosed over the years. Ombudsman Service. Not quite politically correct. Ombudswoman Service, shouldn't it? FOS, we'll call it from now on. And the FOS has enormous clout in the sector. I'll take a look at some of the details of FOS and how it works. Well, first of all, the whole point behind the Financial Ombudsman Service is it provides a place where complaints can be dealt with after the firm has exhausted its own internal procedures, or if the customer, of course, doesn't like what the firm have said. Now, we've talked about complaints before, and the whole point about a complaint is that the customer comes along with a complaint, the firm deals with it, handles it, settles it, whatever. If everyone's happy, that's great. If they're not, then the Financial Ombudsman Service gets called in. Don't get confused with the Pensions Ombudsman Service. Pensions Ombudsman obviously deals with pensions. It's a funny old thing, isn't it? But for all other products and services, it's the Financial Ombudsman that comes along. Now, it's not actually one person, it's a team of people. There's a massive team of ombuds people who get together and deal or adjudicate on complaints that come through from the general public. Now, the whole point behind the Ombudsman Service, so let's put our little ombudsman in here for you. Let's put one person in there for you. There's our ombudsman. The whole point about the Ombudsman Service, FOS, is when they make a adjudication, when they decide what's going to go on, then the company, the firm, must adhere to that. It's very important. The decisions that the FOS make are binding upon the firm, not the customer, but on the firm. Now, we're going through a party wall situation at the moment with our neighbour. We're building down in the cellar, and it's attached to the party wall. Now, you may have looked at Party Wall Acts, but the whole point about party wall is if the neighbour and us can't agree to what we're going to do, then they call in a party wall surveyor. And the party wall surveyor then looks at both situations, does a lot of research, and then makes a decision. And the decision is binding upon both of us, actually. And if we want to disagree with their decision, we've got to go to the courts. Likewise with the Ombudsman, it's mandatory on the firm, not so much on the customer. The customer can take it to the next stage if they want to, but the firm must deal with it. So that's how it works. Now, firms, financial services firms, let's put our firm over here, Sri. Here's our firm. That's our financial advisor firm. And that can be a network, it can be a large IFA brokerage, it can be a mortgage brokerage, it doesn't really matter, that's the firm. Now they have to pay for the Ombudsman. They pay money to the Ombudsman Service in the form of a levy. Now the levy itself is one area which a lot of financial services firms get really upset about because it's a lot of money. And lots of smaller firms who don't tend to get a lot of complaints feel that they're subsidising the big firms that get lots of complaints. And to a degree, they've got a justification for that one. They also have to pay money for each case that goes through. So if there's a case where the customer's gone to the FOS, they've got to pay some money for that as well. Which is often why firms like to deal with the problem, get the problem solved before it goes to FOS. My little cynical self tells me this is why companies try and pay off the customer with a little bit of compensation. I think it costs 500, 600, 700 quid, I think, just to pass on something to the Ombudsman. So if they can pay you off for 300 quid, then they're quids in, aren't they? But that's the cynical me talking through there, not really what goes on. What are the time scales? We always love a time scale, don't we? Well, it's 6 months from the actual decision. So the customer has 6 months from the decision the firm's made, or 6 years from the event itself, whichever comes soon. So you know, it worked on the best case scenario for the customer. So 6 months from the firm making a decision, or 6 years from the event itself. So it's plenty of time. And what happens is it goes to the Ombudsman, they look at the situation, they look at the details, get all the facts, and they then make a decision. So they can issue compensation, of course. They can put things right, and they often do. And there's a number of compensation limits you have to be aware of. 2019 onwards, let's put this over here for you, which is what we're talking about now, they can pay up to, well, 350,000 now in compensation, which is rather nice, isn't it? Prior to 2019, it was a lot less figure. It was 160,000. So you might get a question on that. It's a pretty boring question, isn't it? But you might well get that as well. So that's pretty much what the Ombudsman does. Not much else to say, really. Now, there are, on this topic also of compensation, this is, of course, to do with mis-selling. Something's gone wrong. The customer's been affected financially or emotionally or whatever by some dealing that the firm has done that's incorrect. Now, a lot of people then build into this topic the topic of compensation, or the financial services compensation scheme. So we're going to take a look at that very quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of our FOS man here. I'm going to talk about that because we're talking here about the financial services compensation scheme. Compensation. Now, we're not talking here about mis-selling. We're talking about firms going bust or insolvent. So there's nothing to do with them. Obviously, they've mismanaged themselves, but they've gone bust or insolvent. So it's compensation for the loss or insolvency of a firm. Now, there's a number of figures that you need to be aware of. The first one, which has done the rounds for years now, is deposits in banks and building societies and holders of deposit money. And people can have up to 85,000 on that now. That keeps changing from 75 to 85 according to the euro exchange rate. So this is per person, so you can have a couple of accounts. And it's per bank, so you can have money in different banks, and they recommend that you do that. There is a 1 million temporary allowance. 1 million temporary. This is for situations where, for example, you've sold a house and you've got money in the bank. Nice house to sell, got £1 million in the bank. And I was watching years and years on the telly on BBC the other day, and of course the chap there sells his house in London for 2.6 million, puts the money in overnight, the bank goes bust the following day, and he loses his money. I can't stand that. Maybe the compensation scheme didn't work in the future. But that's fairly straightforward. We understand that one. Now, there are other areas there. There's debt management firms or debt management companies that look after, you make claims against companies, debt management companies. You make claims. PPI has been a big one as well. Again, if they go bust, is also 85. 85 is quite a good number, really. It relates to a number of others as well, so just remember that as well. You've got investment firms. They're also at 85,000. You've got mortgage firms, which is probably yourself as well. They're at 85,000 as well. Again, these are going bust as well, which is quite important. Now, there are a couple of small ones there for you, so you can go to pen. A couple of smaller areas under the compensation scheme for you, just get the numbers. The first one is insurance companies. So insurers. Insurance companies have slightly different rules. If they're selling you a life insurance or annuities, then you can get 100% back on those. So that's life and annuities. So you get your money back. Again, this is if the insurance company goes bust. If it's compulsory insurance, again, that's 100%. So we're talking there about car insurance, legal liability insurance, that sort of thing. It's compulsory. And if it's other types of insurance, it goes to 90%. Let's squeeze that one in there for you. So there's 190% one there you need to remember. And insurance brokers, let's put those across there, you can get 90%. Again, this is if you've lost money through their insolvency, you wouldn't tend to lose it if the broker goes bust because they deal with insurance companies directly anyway, so you probably come under those areas as well for you. But the big one that they always question on this one, deposits. Joint accounts, single accounts, two single people, of course, different lenders, different banks, you can have another 85,000, the 1 million 10 has been tested before. And then that's the compensation scheme. Lots of numbers there, aren't they, thinking about? Lots of 6s and 350s. You can see where the questions are going to come in, aren't they? Very exciting questions too. That pretty much finishes off the Ombudsman Service, so that's been useful. Bye! There you go. So, Financial Ombudsman. All exciting stuff, isn't it? All exciting stuff. Okay, let's give that a rub out then. Have a quick look down for any questions coming through on our live stream. Got a few people picking that up as we speak. Got a lot of people on YouTube like to watch it, see what's going on. Yeah, be careful of this slowdown. It's happening. We know at the weekend. Problem with slowdowns in the economy is they don't report them until 3 months later. You know, when the facts are in, the numbers are in. But we're already seeing possibly this quarter as the first negative GDP for about 7-8 years now, since we came out of the financial crash. So be aware of that. Starting to affect a few things now. Noticed it. Bubbles are beginning to burst a bit more now along the way. Anyway, didn't come here to talk about that. Let's go on to our next topic. The next topic I want to talk about is state pensions. Yeah, let's take a look at state pensions now. It's a bit of an update for you. All those good things on state pensions. Now, I've been talking to my partner over the weekend, and we've been talking about when we're going to retire and make plans for that. And obviously, things are changing around that. I'll talk to you about that in a second or two. So what's happened with state pensions over the last few years? Well, it's all changed, really. It continues to change, isn't it? From 2016, which is obviously well into the future now, they've changed the whole system now, and you have what's called the new single-tier pension scheme, state pension, which basically up the figure now gives people a lot more money. And it's known as the flat rate as well, because it's a flat rate according to whether you've actually paid your national insurance or not. Now, national insurance is obviously the money that we pay into this, which funds the state pension and loads of other benefits too. And the whole point behind national insurance is you have to pay it to get your state pension. There's a minimum of 10 years that you have to pay it for. And then to get the full single pension, you've got to pay 35 years of NI. Sweet name for you. National insurance. As you can appreciate, if you've only paid national insurance for, say, 20 years, you're only going to get a proportion of your single-tier flat pension. But if you paid it for 35 years, you can get the full whack, which is nice. It's quite a lot of money, actually. That adds up. It rate changes each year, but you're talking about sort of 600-700 quid a month. And if you're not taxed, it's not going to be that much more taken off from that. And you get your pensions credit as well onto that. So it's not a significant amount of money. It's a bit of cash is the state pensions. Think about that one. The minimum 10-year one comes up. Seen that as a question before. Lovely story actually of the Second World War. Second World War, of course, the men went out in those days, because it's men and women now that fight on the front line, but back in the Second World War, the men went out fighting, and the women back in the country went to the land and the factories again to produce the war effort, which was great. Many went into the land for the first time, started working. Now, national insurance has been paid since Lloyd George and the First World War, so it's always been paid. And what you found is a lot of these ladies came out of the Land Army in 1945, and they'd only had sort of 4 or 5 years of NI that they paid. So many of them were encouraged later on to increase their national insurance, paid voluntary contributions, to make sure they had the minimum of 10 years, so they got themselves a basic pension of some description. So that's an example there of where somebody would pay a voluntary contribution to up their state pension. So why is it a tier system? Well, it's all changed really. It affected a lot of things. You need to be aware of this really, because you've got, so let's sort of build a little picture here for you. What I want to do now is build a little sort of, I'm going to build, guess what this picture is. Here we go. This is my forklift truck. Do you know what that is? It's my forklift truck. And this forklift truck talks about state pensions. Now in the old days, state pensions used to be quite different to what they are now. You used to be a little bit aware of this one. You've always had the state pension. You've had the state pension in its first guise in the First World War. It's called the First World War. Lloyd George brought it in because it's the current state's pension has been around since the Second World War, and this is payable to all people that pay their national insurance. Talked about that, no big deal. They've always had an extra pension. You might have come across the phrase state second pension, or SERPs, or graduated. These are different names for different extra pensions. The whole point was these extra pensions were added onto the state pension so people get more money when they retire. That was the whole point. And these all have their own way of contributing, usually down to national insurance. But this, of course, was abolished in the changes in 2016. They got rid of the extra pensions and just made it one state flat pension to make it easier and simple. Which you may have come across the phrase opting out or contracting out of the state second pension, or SERPs, which happened in the 80s and 90s. Really big area, that one as well. So that's a bit of background there for you as well. So what are the dates of retirement? Well, we're aware, of course, that 65 is the current pension age. All changed, though, for both male and female. And by the age of sort of early 20s, 2023, 25, 26 onwards, it's going up to age 67. There's talk, of course, of it going up even further. Now, when I retire, I'm retiring at 2033 as my planned retirement. I'm going to have to retire at 67. Obviously, 2033 is a bit later than that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause my pension for a few years, and that way you get a bit more. So if you don't receive your pension at state retirement age, you can actually pause it. When you do take it, you get that bit more per month. Now I'm going to pause mine until I'm 70. That's my plan. So I get a little bit extra state pension to add to everything as well. Other things for you. You may remember the term pensions credits. Now the pensions credits is, if you like, our extra that we pay people. Effectively, this gets added to the state pension, so it kind of replaces those. Pensions credit that you don't pay for, it's part of the deal, and it brings you up to a minimum amount of monthly or weekly income. That's your pensions credit, which you come across. And you can get yourself up to date with this. All financial advisors should get their clients to do a state pension forecast, which you can do online. It tells you what your state pension is going to pay you. You should all do that, really. Everybody should do that along the way. Other quick things for you on state pension. It's kept in line with inflation. You may have heard the phrase in the news. It's very political, really, is it? You might have heard the phrase of the triple lock. There you go. The triple lock, which is very much a political thing as well, because a lot of pensioners, you see, like to vote, and therefore the political parties like to woo the pensioners to get them to vote. More pensioners vote than the younger generation, because the younger generation is too busy, probably. The pensioners have got plenty of time, haven't they? They usually man all these places where people do their ticks and things like that. But the triple lock is quite important. It's the higher. In other words, each year the amount of pension you receive goes up in line with three things. The higher of average earnings. Now, average earnings, of course, is a mandatory figure on the average income of people in the UK. I think it's about 15, 16, 17,000, maybe a bit more, I don't know. Average earnings, or CPI, which is the inflation index that we use. So remember, this is the higher of those, or 2.5%. So if you think about it, If CPI is lower than 2.5, you get 2.5. If average earnings have gone up by more, then you get the best figure. So it's a great system. They're trying to get rid of that, but it's very political, and a lot of pensioners don't like it because it means that their state pension goes up by at least 2.5%, or inflation if that's higher, or average earnings if that's higher. Because earnings, of course, have really been increasing in the last couple of years, so it's more like that's the figure that they're using. So that's your state pension. Not a lot more to say about that, really. Exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to getting mine when I'm 70, which is 15 years away. And maybe won't be paid until about 90, probably. I don't know how it's all changing, isn't it, at the end of the day. And you like my picture of the forklift truck? It's all right now. The exhaust pipe at the bottom there. Hope that's been useful. Bye. There you go. Alrighty, quick thoughts there for you on state pension. Hope that sort of brought you up to speed with a few things along the way. What I'm going to do now is get this rubbed out, have a quick look down in YouTube, Vimeo for any questions. And I like to try and answer the questions as we go along. Well, a lot of people like to throw these things at me to go through and put these to the boot camp for you just to update you along the way. Nothing coming through, so it's good to double check there as well. Okay, quick drink of my cup of tea. Because I can. There you go. Good weather this weekend, wasn't it? Got school holidays starting in a couple of weeks, so make sure you do your holidays before you go there. Otherwise, the roads start to get really busy. Well, that's the holiday roads. That is the actual commuting roads get a lot easier, don't they? Yeah, well, let's take a look at just a general topic, really, on protection. I'm talking here about how consumers are protected. So I'm talking here about consumer protection. Now, of course, when you're dealing with financial services, we're dealing with consumers all the time, maybe with their mortgage or whatever, later life lending you're doing, whatever it is you get involved in. We need to be making sure that consumers are protected. And the biggest consumer protection outfit, of course, is the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. The FCA effectively report to the government, although they are independent effectively, and they make sure that consumers are protected. They have a host of rules, handbooks, all sorts of things, and they look after consumers very well. In fact, they've increased their ability to protect consumers massively over the years and do a pretty good job, actually, if I'm honest with you. There's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, a lot of firms complain about it, but at the end of the day, they do have a fantastically big remit. They look after all areas of financial services, not just mortgages and financial services as well, loans, credit cards, the works now, and therefore do a really good job. Who else have we got that looks after things for you? Well, you've got HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and the Treasury, which pretty much runs the show as well. Now, do they protect consumers? Well, not really. They don't protect consumers, but they make sure they look after the economy. The Treasury, of course, reports to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and they oversee the Treasury to make sure that the economy's in good order and working really well. They also pull the strings at the FCA. You know, the old Pinocchio strings. They pull the strings at the FCA, make sure they do what they're doing. It's very political, of course. And the Treasury and the Chancellor take care of the economy. The Chancellor's got £30-odd billion stashed away for Brexit, which is rather nice. We'll try and go a little bit of that. It'd be nice, wouldn't it? A lot of money, that one. That's HMRC. Who else have we got? Well, we got DWP, the Department of Work and Pensions, DWP. Now, the Department of Work and Pensions, of course, are a government department. Naturally, they're a public sector, and they produce and give welfare benefits to the UK population. So DWP looks at all the different welfare benefits and provides a safety net to consumers. Down here, of course, we've got our little consumer. Ta-da! There's our little consumer. There's Bob. Now, consumers, of course, need protecting. That's the whole point behind it. Caveat emptor doesn't really work in financial services. So DWP provides them with protection as well along the way, not a really difficult one as well. Claims Management Regulator. Let's put them over here for you. Odd one to put in here for you, but you know, quite important. The Claims Management Regulator is quite important one because they look after or they regulate the firms that promise that you'll get compensated for missed deals. PPI is a big one, isn't it? There's a number of claims management companies that will put a claim in for you to get compensation. Now, they've had some bad press recently for the way they operate, particularly with the cold calling and the cold emailing. So you've got the claims management regulator that regulates them. Not much more to say about that one, really. What I like is kind of like the James Bond, really, which is the National Crime Agency. Let's put them in here, shall we? The National Crime Agency. Now, the National Crime Agency looks after national crime, obviously. And what they tend to do is look after financial fraud and financial crime. Money laundering is a big one. And when I had to change some €500 notes over at Tesco's the other day, they contacted the National Crime Agency to see if I was on their books of dodgy geezers, dealing with financial crime. So they look after financial crime and money laundering, which is a good thing on the way, isn't it? And another one that's hit the news recently is called the Single Financial Guidance Body. I'll put this over here for you. The Single Financial Guidance Body, or the SFGB, which sounds like a police force, doesn't it? Now, the Single Financial Guidance Body, it's sort of the first step to provide help and advice to the population. Now, the FCA, of course, want to look after the consumer, and they're delegating a lot of the educating of consumers to the Single Financial Guidance Body. And this has replaced a number of organisations over the years, MoneyWise and those sort of things. Organisations that used to provide advice and information to customers is now given the job of the Single Financial Guidance Body. They guide the public in financial areas, really. Whether we'll see in the future them giving basic advice to consumers, I don't know. It's on the cards, because they're going to give information. It's not a lot of difference between starting to give advice or basic advice, because a lot of the average person on the street's been pushed away from financial advice. They can't afford it, or they're not willing to pay fees. Banks, lenders, big sales forces are all gone now. So gone the days where the average person got financial advice. So that may well be an area which they're looking at moving forward. A couple of other smaller ones for you. I'll put these over here for you, which you may have come across, famous for their magazine and website. They're a sort of a consumer organisation. Here we go. The Which magazine is, or the Which website is a useful one. They give information to consumers. They charge for it now as well, particularly on their website. So that's quite a famous sort of consumer guidance organisation as well. And the big one, though, is the CAB, the Citizens Advice Bureau. The CAB is the first place you should go to if you want any kind of advice as a citizen. Often staffed by volunteers. I'm looking in a few years' time to do some volunteer work, and I might rock up at the CAB and give advice to people. Been in business 35, 40 years. I can probably give some advice along the way. But that's what it's done for people paying back. It's a voluntary organisation, and very, very competent. They're very trustworthy too. There's a lot of press at the moment about fake news, isn't it, on the internet? Do you trust the news that you're being given by your Facebook, Instagram feeds? But these organisations, particularly the SFGB, CAB, which you can trust these. They're like the BBC of information, financial information. So they look after customers as well. Final thing for you with the CAB, you probably heard about them putting the super complaint in as well. They put a super complaint in recently to do with standard variable rates being too high. So they are looking after the consumer. So as you can appreciate, the UK consumer is well looked after by a number of organisations. The CeMAP exam itself needs you to obviously know about the FCA, HMRC, GWP. CAB crops up quite a bit, and the National Crime Agency and money laundering, of course. That doesn't really come into it, really. This is becoming more and more important as a place to go for consumer information. Hope that's been a bit of an update for you. Bye! There you go. So a little video there for you on that topic. Hope that's been useful for you. Okay, let's have a quick rub out then for you as we move on. We're coming up to close the play in a second or two. Just want to give you a little sales tip, really. New idea for you, just to move you forward on your business. Yeah, let's take a look at something you might want to try. It's slightly different. It's called prospecting. We talk about prospecting. This is how to get over cold calling once and for all. Now, we all know that cold calling is dead. So cold calling, call it what, or cold emailing, these things are thing, is dead now. We want to get away from that. So here's an idea for you to try if you're in the business of selling to consumers directly. Or selling to businesses, it works there as well. But consumers is where we're at, really. Now, the metaphor here is the later life lending market and lending to the elderly. Now, what normally happens is people get a database, they contact people, say, do you want to buy this, do you want to buy that, do you want to buy that? And you can contact people through various means and methods, and that's fine, I get that. But what you're doing there is you're selling. So here's what you do. Number of steps. First of all, you've got to know who your customer is. So third time this morning, I'm going to draw my little picture, because I like to draw my little picture of Bob, or Jim, or whoever it is. You've got to know your customer. You've got to know what their needs are. You've got to know what their challenges are. You've got to know what their problems are. You've got to really understand what the customer's all about before you even reach them. So you've got to segment your marketplace. Know who is it you're trying to contact. In the later life market, I'm looking at people in retirement who have a need for a lump sum of money for whatever reason that is. So that's the kind of person I'm looking for, who own a property outright without mortgage. So that's where I'm going with that. The next thing you do, once you're crystal clear as to the products or problems and challenges and needs they have, is you then write some information. That might be a white paper, but you put some information together. Now, you might be good at writing, so you might put a white paper, how to obtain money, how to release money from your property, how to do equity release. You want to put in that information everything they need to know to do it themselves. That's the important thing, DIY, do it themselves. Now, this might be a booklet, it might be a printed booklet, it might be a written booklet, it might be an e-book, it doesn't really matter. It might be a video clip that you're doing, video. It might be a podcast that you're doing. There might be a little sort of music thing there. It could be any means of producing information, but you mustn't skimp on it. You must give them everything they need to do. Then what you do is you contact the customer, however you wish to do it. It could be by direct mail, all that. It could be by email. You could even phone them. You could use live chats, whatever method you've got to contact the customer. But you don't sell them anything. You just ask permission to send them the information that you talked about. Obviously, they've got the problems and needs and challenges because you've researched that. And people will say, yeah, send it to me or email it or whatever it is. And that's what you do. It's all you do. And then you wait. And then you sit back and you wait. You don't contact them again 2 weeks like, did you get the book? What do you think of it? Yeah, don't do that. That's salesy. No, you don't do that. All you do is wait. And there's people will make 3 decisions. Think about it. The first is psychology going into it themselves. The first thing is they might do it themselves. They might decide to do it themselves because they've got the expertise or the want to do it themselves. And that's fine. So that's the first decision. That's great because you're helping them. The second decision is they might do nothing. They might just go to status quo and just forget about it, which is fine as well. The third customer wants to do it, but hasn't got the time or the expertise to do it, and is quite happy to bring somebody in to do it for them. They might just be busy. They might just not have the time. In the later life market, people generally have time. They may not have the expertise. They may not have the ability to do it. They might have the trust to do it themselves. So they'll bring you in because you've demonstrated your capability in whatever it is you've created. They'll bring you in. They'll ask you to deal with it. Whether they'll go and shop around for the service is entirely up to how well you deal with them. But they will contact you. Try it. You won't have any stress. You won't have any pressure. If you're doing this as a call centre, there's a lot of you involved here. Maybe put a couple of you on this method and a few of you on the old-fashioned method of selling to people on the telephone or email. But all you do, it works. Try it. It's something I'm using and I'm doing really well and successfully. So hopefully you'll do the same. Bye. Quick little tip there for you. Nothing too fancy, but psychology comes into it all, doesn't it? Okay, nothing going on down there. Any final questions coming? Can't see any. So we've overrun by a few minutes today. So I'm going to wish you all a fantastic week. Looking forward to the summer. It's already started here in Cheltenham. Looking forward to some warm, sunny days and all those good things. Beer and pub gardens and everything like that. So we'll see you all next week. Bye. There you go. Let's switch off and say goodbye.